All right, so we finished matter in the ecosystem, and now we're starting energy. And I want to start by saying, try to never, ever use the sentence matter and energy, those two words in one sentence, okay? Just if you put that in your head from now, you're going to avoid getting a lot of questions wrong. So matter is matter, energy is energy. Matter, we know, does what in the ecosystem? Cycles. And energy? So matter is considered what kind of system? Closed. Energy, on the other hand, is open. So let's talk about energy. So energy, we know, flows and doesn't cycle. And it does, just like matter, it has a law. What does the law of energy say?
It can't be created or destroyed.
It can't be created or destroyed. Only transform, change, rearrange. Remember all of those. Now, it also can be called the law of thermodynamics. So that word describes the law of energy. It's just another way to say it. When energy transforms, though, so matter ended, the law of matter ended there. The change is matter and the word matter. When energy gets transformed, three things happen, and they call that the second law of thermodynamics. So the law of thermodynamics, part one, is energy can't be created or destroyed. Part two says three things. Anybody know what it is? And if you look at the diagrams, you might be able to give me some answers. Good job. Whenever energy is transformed, it's lost as heat. And by lost, I don't mean it's gone, because energy cannot be destroyed. By lost, I mean it loses its ability to do work, which is the definition of energy. Energy has a ability to do work, and when energy is transformed or transferred, it loses its ability or its energy input, let's say. What happens also when energy is transferred? So this heat that's lost flows in a specific direction. Anybody know what direction that is? Look at the visuals and try to come up with an answer. Good. Heat flows from hot to cold. Basically, it's the same thing as when you study diffusion in bio, where there's more to where there's less. Same thing or same concept, where it's hot to cold. And then, whenever energy gets transferred, the system's ability to do work is lost, and they call that entropy or chaos within the system. So this little description of molecules being like condensed and then spread apart is what describes the chaos, or they go all over the place. All right, so energy in the ecosystem. We talked about matter being closed. Energy is open. It's basically open because energy flows, and when it flows, it gets lost as heat, and heat's going to rise and eventually could, let's say, exit our atmosphere. That's how much it could go. In addition, where does energy start on Earth? The sun. So the sun is one of the 6 forms of energy on Earth. Even though you've learned your whole life, there's really 2 types of energy, potential and kinetic, okay? I have all my kinetics in blue and my potential, or one example of potential in orange. Anybody know what the definition of those are? Potential and kinetic?
Kinetic is like motion.
Kinetic is motion, and by motion we mean motion of molecules, okay? So it's not just necessarily you're going to see a movement. It's movement of molecules. What about potential?
It's like stored.
Stored. That's perfect. So now tell me any of the 6 examples other than sun that appear on this picture that describe types of energy. Electrical. Good. Electrical energy is energy in motion, or a form of kinetic energy. What else? Heat. Wind is actually referenced as mechanical energy. It's really the one form of energy that describes actual movement. What else? What kind of energy glows? And you see that in like The Simpsons. Nuclear. Good. Nuclear is its own form of energy. And then our one potential energy is food and fossil fuels. And I want you to write the word fossil fuels and food so that you remember that those are examples of potential energy. Who could tell me what type of energy that is? Think of food. What energy is found in food?
Photos.
Good. What's the chemical energy that produces energy of food? Or what's the energy food molecule? We just learned that in glucose. Good. So even though it starts in a whole process, those are the 6 forms of energy. And we're going to use these throughout the school year. Can chemical energy be transformed into electrical energy? Yes. Can nuclear be transformed into heat? Yes. Scary, but yes. All these types of energy can transform into one form or another. When they transform, though, they lose the ability to do work, okay? Because energy is lost according to the law of thermodynamics. So let's start with energy through the biosphere, and then we'll talk about energy through layers of Earth, more specific, throughout the school year. So where does energy in the biosphere? It has to start somewhere, and it starts at the sun. Good. Who's going to use this energy?
Plants.
Plants. Everybody always blurts out the word plants, but what do we call plants that use solar energy? Producers. What's another word for them? Oh, good. Autotrophs. What does that mean?
Make their own food.
It means they make their own food. Okay, good. Besides plants, who else does this? Bacteria. How? Or how do plants do it? Photosynthesis. What's that reaction? Who could say it? You have to know it on the test. Light. Carbon dioxide. Water. Make glucose. Oxygen. Good. What do bacteria do? They use heat instead of light in the deep ocean or hydrothermal vents. And they make what? They make food. How?
Chemos.
Good. With chemicals. The chemical in this case is sulfur. Here's a tip for you for the test. The chemosynthetic reaction is not going to be on your test. I am going to include that when we start water. So that's your freebie right now. It's a lot of reactions you have to know, so I'm giving that one a break. All right, so we have plants, and they made their own food. And then we're going to move on. Who's next? Heterotrophs. What do we call them? Consumers. What do? Eat. They eat other organisms. If you are an organism that feeds off plants or producers, what are you called? Herbivore or primary consumer. Good. Or you eat a consumer that eats an herbivore. What are you?
Carnivore.
You're a carnivore. What do you eat?
Things.
You eat meat. So primary carnivores are also called secondary consumers. Secondary carnivores would be called what? Tertiary consumers. Or we don't have to say that word. We could say third level consumers if you want to use a word that you're familiar with, okay? And then third level carnivores would be fourth level consumers, okay? Because consumers begin at plants, and then comes primary carnivores or secondary consumers. But all of those will be eating meat or other organisms. If you want to write that also instead of meat, you could put other organisms. So what do I mean by secondary carnivores or secondary consumer? If I have grass, what am I? What am I if I'm grass? A producer or an autotroph, okay? Give me a small organism that eats grass.
Rabbit.
A rabbit. Same exact example from last class. What is a rabbit considered? A primary consumer because it eats what? Plants. Okay? Who eats a rabbit? A fox. A fox would be a primary carnivore or a secondary consumer. Who eats a fox? Hawks. This is the exact to a T example from my last class. We have grass, which is the producer, a rabbit, which is my primary consumer, a fox, which is my primary carnivore or secondary consumer, and hawk, which is my secondary carnivore or third level consumer, okay? And it goes on and on and on. But we have other kinds of consumers that don't really follow the food chain or that path. Some consumers eat both plants and animals. What are they called? Omnivores. We're like a perfect example. We usually eat protein, which is the meat, with some vegetable or some form of plant. Consumers that can be herbivores, carnivores, and omnivores, and eat remains are called what? But look at them. So yes, they're not decomposers because they eat the remains. Good. They are scavengers. Examples are vultures and raccoons. Taylor, this is you. Who are my consumers in this page? These are decomposers. What do? They break down organic compounds and return them into, or break down matter. They are our recyclers of matter. They end every cycle and break down that cycle to go back into the system. Decomposers are a perfect example, but then we've got other organisms that are not decomposers, but they also break down. That would be my earthworm, a beetle. They are what we call bottom dwellers. Anybody know what they are? It starts with a D also. Heterotrophs. They feed off little pieces of organic matter that kind of are not really part of an organism. They broke off and they break it down into nutrients back into the system.